Welcome to Common Mansplaining, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Welcome back. Eddie and Christian here. Christian, how's it going?
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Indeed, indeed. All right. We got a fun one today. We're going to talk about the violation of norms and how the American political system keeps descending further and further into madness as basically just to cut to the chase, the pattern is this. One side will violate a norm, something that's been in place for a long time, and then the next side will feel that's that much more free to continue to do the same thing and or like one up it. And right, so it gets worse and worse. And of course, some of these norms we're going to talk about are just it's kind of like etiquette, like politeness, stuff that we've had around for a long time. Some of it's maybe old school stuff that's echoes of the past, but a lot of it is, institutional, like and necessary to our system. And if we lose it, we've basically lost a fundamental aspect of what it means to be American or what it means to have an American exceptionalism. Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about it. Chris, you want to talk about some of the history of norms in America?
Yeah. First off, I do want to say sometimes norms aren't actually broken, but they're talked about breaking a norm, and they try to gauge the popular reaction.
Yeah.
Right. That's also a trick that we've seen a lot lately, is talking about something and seeing if people would support it or not. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so again, America was a new form of government. I mean, a new republic, trying to base off the old Roman Republic and building with new ideas, Enlightenment ideas. And the sort of balance of power is a new thing, right? Not to have a tyrant, right? We recently had these No Kings protests, and Eddie and I both rolled our eyes because, of course, we don't have a king. But what we have had is problems with the balance of power, because philosophically we wanted to have. We found the British system was so corrupt to us and so aberrant. We wanted a system where there were checks and balances, against.
Right.
One becoming too overpowering, overbearing. So, these things based in the Enlightenment, the rules of making laws, right? There are a lot of steps to make laws and a lot of things that can stop a law, right?
Definitely.
And it's supposed to be so that it is hard to get stuff done, and the government moves slowly. That's a check to try to curb the size and the scope of and the power of the government, right?
It's a feature, not a bug.
That's a feature, not a bug. People complain, why does it take so long to get anything done, right? This is what it was designed for. We're not a parliamentary system where you're getting power now. You have all the, space to get your policy with no obstacles or compromises.
Right.
So, so that system, and a lot of it, there's a lot of debate. Free speech is one of our First Amendment, and a big thing. Like, we were denied representation in British government, so we really wanted to make room that people could have their voices heard, their concerns. The Great Compromise, which people complain about now, with the Electoral College,
sure,
right? In giving, it was a compromise between large populated states and small states to give them, the same number of senators per state in one house, and then population in the other house, was to give those some states so they couldn't be just completely ignored and run over, right?
Right.
And and these were sort of norms that we were still going to try to respect, sort of these minority interests, and not just sort of the power players at the time. And so obviously politics becomes at different times more confrontational, right?
And you might say that.
And that's a feature that's a good part of a healthy republic. The Roman Republic were that. So, do you know the opposite of that sort of opposition system is fascism? Do you know? Right, people rarely want to define fascism, but fascism is it just means essentially all united, right? People talk about how united the country was after 9/11, right? Right. It's sort of when all parts of the government are working in harmony. And Rome realized that that was dangerous, but also sometimes needed. So they had a system for that, right, where they could designate somebody a dictator.
Right.
Right. You're familiar with the story of Cincinnatus.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. So the very right, who Rome was threatened and being attacked, and they took this senator and they made him a dictator, and he led the armies, and nobody could. Right. And so nobody was backstabbing him. Nobody could talk negatively against him. Everybody was with him. Right.
Right.
And he wins this war. And they couldn't even have debates about, hey, maybe he should give up. Maybe he shouldn't. Right. You couldn't even say it. It was still, when he has this, there was no opposition.
100%
And he
control.
freely gave that, it was fascism comes from the word for the thing, the item they give him, the scepter kind of thing. Gave that back, became a senator, then retired, and they called him. He did it twice, right?
Right.
And voluntarily gave up that. So they look upon that right. So there are times when we want to be united, but really debate, freedom of speech, holding the other side accountable, realizing that there's not just one way to do something, is an important part of our system. And so there has to be sort of a fundamental sort of respect, or this is how we do things here.
Right.
And they're usually based on hard-won lessons learned.
Yep.
Right. If you've ever been part of a startup company, which I have, and you have releases, you have things you've done for the first time, you're like, all right, that didn't go well, or we struggle with that. You'll have meetings to be like, all right, what are some lessons we learned so we don't repeat this in the future?
Right.
So a lot of our government processes have been hard won.
Absolutely.
And one of the big things is sort of decency for the individual, especially in the Senate, and not making the attacks personal. Because, right, in 1856, during the debate over slavery, when it got very heated, one senator took his cane out and beat Charles Sumner in, in the United States Capitol with a cane, and hospitalized him, beat him unconscious. He didn't die, but it was really bad. Like the physical violence resulted. And we're a nation of ideas. We don't want to get our way through force. It has to be through persuasion, right? Through convincing the other side, right, or maybe compromise, not through I'm going to kill you or maim you, or right. That's not our system.
Right.
So now in the 20th century, right, we find that these norms
are breaking down.
Right. And Trump violates a lot of these norms. And
he does.
I shared with you a discussion that I had. They talked about when Mike Pence was his VP. They talked to him about how Mike Pence was just really upset when, after a State of the Union, Nancy Pelosi took the speech, because Trump hands a copy of the speech to both Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi before he gives the speech. Pelosi went and took the speech and tore it up on stage in front of the camera, and he was just like, oh my gosh, the disrespect, the breaking of norms, things like this. But when they asked Mike Pence about some of the things that Trump, says that are completely unpresidential, just like at a left wing, and he was like, well, Trump was elected to be a disruptor, right? And right. And so this is the thing we're going to talk about today, is like, for partisans, people have a tendency to get really upset when the other side breaks norms,
right?
But grant more allowance when their side breaks the norms. But they're still they're decaying our Republican form of government.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so something that the common man might not necessarily appreciate. So what are some examples that you've thought of where this is happening, and we talk through, and maybe we can help understand that?
Yeah, wow. Where do I start? I mean, America itself is like it's a new experiment, of course, right? So we broke a norm just starting America, but since then we've had a lot of institutions that have carried us through the years. One that really stands out to me is that the media, going back 50, 60 years ago, was essentially a nonpartisan engine, right? It was fact-finding in its nature. It was just like, we're just going to go out and find the news. We're going to find corruption wherever it is, because that's the big story, right? No matter who's doing it. and we're going to report on it. At one point in time, I think Walter Cronkite was like the most trusted face in the world, right? Like, and now it is very obviously just a partisan arm. Like basically the legacy media, the elite media, all the like Fox, MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, LA Times, these are all just literally puppets for whichever party they represent more. I think that started, originally it probably started with the backdrop of civil rights and stuff and the sexual revolution, and a lot of these media engines were, they were catering to the urban populace, and so just kind of as a side effect, because the urban populace slanted left, they found that audience capture was easier to commandeer if they were more left leaning. And it got to the point where, like, after 20 years of that, by the way, I should point out that like the left does tend to break more norms than the right on average, not necessarily as a bad thing, but that's just kind of like the way that the left thinks, the way the right thinks, right? The right comes up to a fence and sees that fence and wonders, like, maybe there's a reason that fence is there, whereas the left often will blow right by it because who put a fence in my way, that kind of thing.
Conservatives are more willing to look back at history. That's true.
Definitely. So like we get to like 20 years of this, and the right's like, oh my gosh, we don't have anybody to represent us except for like radio. Rush Limbaugh was basically the only person, and so they had to create Fox News to kind of counterbalance that. But that just made everything worse, because now like the media is just like this big divide, right? So that's one of the big norms that I've seen. There's a lot though. I mean, let's see, filibusters.
Well, it would be one thing if they were nakedly proclaiming their biases,
right?
And like they do in the UK, like the Mirror, right, says they're all for the Labour Party, right, and the Telegraph, I believe, is for the Conservative Party, kind of thing like that. But when they still try to wear the old mantle of nonpartisanness, that's like the thing, right? That's breaking. It's like, just be honest. Like, right. No, we're here to support, the Democrat viewpoint, the stories that matter to Democrats, right?
Yeah. It's funny. Tanya says right now she's not seeing left versus right, and that's just her. Unfortunately, it is just you. I wish it was. I wish it was so many more of us, right? Like, I wish we could all come together. We're going to talk about that too. Like, it's just gotten worse and worse with the partisan politics. It's gotten to the point where, I mean, like, the way that we maneuver as political like components, right? Like the left and the right have gotten worse and worse, as far as like it's gotten to the point where we, first started with filibustering, right? Where we used to just kind of like use it very, very sparingly. And now it's like every day, like we just, anytime we can use it, we use the filibuster, which brings around the nuclear option, which is like even having an option called the nuclear option should tell you something about the status of politics, in America, right? And then people using impeachment again we used to protect the office of the presidency, right? Like we used to, it wasn't the person in the office, right? Because of course you can hate or love that guy, right? He might be your party, he might be the other party. You can hate or love that guy, but it used to be we would love the presidency regardless of who is in it. I mean, you were telling me about like JFK, like they would usher his girlfriends in the side, like nobody would talk about it, right? Because it was just the fact that we didn't want to disrupt the presidency. The office held that kind of gravitas that we didn't want to kill that. And even as new as Clinton, like even though Clinton, we ultimately tried to impeach him, even during that procedure, there was like the conversation. I remember being on the side of, yes, I think Clinton is guilty of wrongdoing, but we should just sweep it aside because we should protect the presidency and manage this in-house. I remember saying, like, I was like, look, yes, he probably perjured himself. Yes, this is really unbecoming of the president, but I don't want to be a laughingstock to the rest of the world, so let's manage this in-house. Let's
People don't tell the truth about marital affairs, but was this impeachable? Which ultimately, like, he was not removed from office, right?
Right. But then, like, you fast forward to Trump, and there's like no conversation of that whatsoever. Nobody's saying let's protect the presidency. They're just like, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him. Like,
Well, yeah.
and don't get me wrong, I get that Trump is a polarizing figure. I get it, right? But I mean, impeachment. Let's see what else.
Well, I just want to, before we move on, hold on, I just have a point. For some of you maybe who weren't politically interested or activated in 2016 or 2017 after Trump won the election, which stunned everyone and was inaugurated.
Yeah.
The opposition he faced, right? The pink hats, and the stuff, and they were willing to blow down everything because they said this is unprecedented. We don't have to accept that they were against normalizing Trump's presidency. Like, we can normalize this or accept that this is a legitimate election. This is unprecedented. Where they gave themselves license to break all these norms because of how big a threat Trump was to democracy and our institutions. Judy, who's been on this program, was totally taken in by all of that and just thought it right. If she didn't stand up vociferously to everything Trump did, then he was, going to be a dictator who never left office. And she realized, obviously he did our institutions endure when he lost the election, things like that. That all of that hype was wrong. But so many norms were torn down in opposition to in opposition to Trump because of the dislike of him personally. Right? The personal attacks and the attacks that became attacks on the presidency and not willing to engage or legitimize the presidency. It's really hard to sort of, if you weren't paying attention or politically activated then, or maybe just shallow in the water, but how deep that went.
Oh yeah, it was huge. Another one like that goes right along with that is the concept of election security, right? Like, and Trump takes a heavy load of responsibility for this one, even though I wouldn't say he initialized it. I'd say, we probably flirted with it in the 2000 election, and then we hit it again in 2016 when Hillary called Trump illegitimate, for a long time before really kind of recanting and saying it was. And even now, she still says that she won or whatever. But Trump took it like to the next level, right? Like he definitely like took that like challenge to election security. And then like one thing I've noticed about Trump, ironically, is that he actually doesn't, funny enough, he doesn't break as many norms as people think. But what he does do is take the norms that are already broken and go way to the nine, like way beyond what anybody thought would happen. Like
what's an example?
So, like, a good example was that election security, right? Like, election security was a norm that would basically had already been broken by Hillary Clinton, but he like really amplified it. Another one would be like use of executive action just to like manage partisan politics and to like kind of bypass Congress. Really, Obama did that far faster and far more heavily than most, and he broke the norm. Like, because we were gridlocked under Obama, like, almost immediately after he got into office. And so he's like, well, we'll just dispense with Congress altogether. And people don't remember that, right? People kind of like are still in awe of Obama because he's the first black president and he had all this. He was very charismatic. I'll give him that.
Other than Obamacare, he was not able to really legislatively succeed at anything.
Funny, I didn't even know this, but do you know that DACA, dreamers or whatever, like, did you know that's not even a law? I swear I thought it was a law because like we think about it, like it's a law because it acts like legislation. In reality, it was just a DHS memorandum that was distributed by Obama that said, this is how we're going to prosecute. It's like, it was just prosecutorial judgment. He was like, we're just not going to prosecute and deport kids because whatever. Right. And it wasn't a law. It was just, this is how we're going to do things. It was just like an executive action to manage. And that was like just one of many examples where he just kind of like bypassed Congress because they couldn't pass the Dreamers Act, and he did a lot of stuff. Like Obama broke the norm of like using DOJ as like kind of a really weaponized system, like going after pro-lifers and using people whine about Don Lemon with the FACE Act, and Obama and Biden like went after pro-lifers with the FACE Act like you wouldn't believe, like probably unconstitutionally.
And you would be much more likely to be audited if you were registered Republican or things like that, or small business owner, who donated even just to local Republican candidates, boom, you're getting it on. So really targeted IRS stuff, which before, right, was just let the IRS sort of randomly choose their audits rather than directing them on your political enemies.
Yeah, the IRS, what did they had like, they even like scrutinized the NGOs, like using words like patriot and like what was the other one, like Tea Party, because Tea Party was coming in right at the time. It was like they would like use those to like sift through NGOs and then scrutinize those in particular. I'm like, wow, that's obviously it's only going to catch the conservative side, and like stuff like, but then Trump, here comes Trump. And like, how many executive actions has he passed? How many executive orders? Like, it's just he takes the norms that are already broken and he's like, Biden pardons a bunch of people, and Trump's like, oh, we're gonna pardon people, are we? And of course, right? Like,
in a way that has never been used before, and to the shame of both of them. I mean, this one really is a dark stain on both of them. I want to sort of reflect again the importance of certain norms, and in a lot of countries around the world, right, where there's a election that's very close, there's a lot of conflict. As soon as whoever gets in power after that, what's the first thing they do? They immediately start suppressing their opponent, right? And that was the beauty of the American system so long. It's like we have this peaceful transition of power, and you didn't feel the need to suppress your opponent. And everybody was like, it wasn't. In the 20th century, that seemed like, 21st century, that norm has seemed to have eroded. That when Democrats would be in office, they'd try to cut down on the base or fundraising base of the Republicans. And when Republicans were in power, they try to cut down on the fundraising base of the Democrats, things like that. And so when those norms start, we're not actively like imprisoning political prisoners or things like that, but it's still, we're using, when the president gets in power and starts using his power to suppress, especially fundraising and other things of his political, it's un-American. And that's why Trump is not a fascist. He's not a dictator.
No,
but he does things that are un-American, that are breaking these norms. And I think that is a thing, because he doesn't really have a strict ideology he wants to hold to. He has his interests and the things that bother him and he remembers. Now, give Trump a little credit. Letitia James and the stuff they tried doing to Trump when he was out of office for 4 years, the prosecutions, the ways they tried to disqualify him as a candidate, was unprecedented. And was definitely breaking with the norm of an ex-president, how you treated an ex-president or somebody who could still potentially be a candidate. Right. And so Trump had complete contempt for them, and had tried to weaponize his DOJ, which has not worked so far. And I disagree with how he's done it. But he saw that norm being broken, and he's ready to break it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. That's the thing, right? He sees one person break a norm and he's just like, now, as far as norms that he's broken himself, I mean, there's definitely some, like, I think I would give him the election security norm. I mean, he's definitely taken that to a level that's just so far beyond, what's funny too, is that, you'll see the same thing happen on usually it's the left will break a norm and then the right will try to break it too, because they're like, wow, they broke a norm and they're getting ahead because of it, right? And like the media is a great example of that. They're like, wow, they take control of the media. We need to do that, like, why are we so far behind? And so that, they kind of mosey on into it. But in this case, it was, Trump broke that norm, and then, the left is like, because I remember when Trump said, that the elections was rigged, right? And nobody really even knows what that means. It's such a vague term anyway. But I was assured by everyone on the left that that's not possible, that widespread voter fraud is like impossible, that voter fraud just basically never happens, and elections can't be rigged. And what are they saying about the midterms coming up? Trump is going to rig the midterms. I'm like, wait, that thing that you just told me isn't possible is now possible. But of course, right? How can you say it's not right? Because Trump broke that norm, and now the left is going to use the same playbook because it worked for Trump. I mean, all you have to do is just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, gaslight people into saying, I actually won the election, and then the left is like, that's ridiculous. He didn't win. But then they see the kind of popularity he got, and he got back in office. They're like, maybe we should just say that we won all the election. Like at that point, whoever has the power, they have to just use the same playbook because it works, right? Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Trump broke a norm for was name calling. Yes. And the left has followed after that.
Oh my gosh, huge.
And all they can do is name call now. And they right to where words don't mean anything anymore, right? And I think that's a detriment to our political discourse. So what we want here at Common Mansplaining, where people try to come together, really try to get to ideas and try to come to a common sense, way forward, compromise even. And the name calling is about putting up walls and not engaging, not even listening to the ideas the other side has to offer.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, on that note, we're real quick as a side, anybody who wants to come debate with us, anybody who wants to come, converse, we're always down. And moreover, we're always going to be respectful about it. Like, we're never going to come at you with like, names and stuff like that and shouting and all that. We might get, passionate about this stuff, but like the as passionate as you see it, you don't see us screaming at each other and stuff like that. It's never going to be something where I'm, literally angry about it. We're going to talk it through. We're going to try to understand each other better. And that's the way, political discourse is supposed to work. Now, Trump is definitely, it's intriguing. Now, Trump definitely has a different, that is a norm he broke because he definitely does it differently than other people too. Because the way the left uses name calling is fundamentally different than the way Trump does it. Trump does it because he's kind of like petty. He's using it as a way to, it's still to discredit and to not contend with, but in a different, I don't know how to describe it really. It's like he's making fun of you, right? But that kind of like condescension is not the same as what the left does. What the left does is motive impugning, right? So it's kind of a fundamental difference, right? Whereas Trump will like, pretend like, you're beneath him and call you a laughable name and like Newscum, Gavin Newscum or something like that, right? Yeah. The left doesn't play with you or pick on you. They say you're racist or you're sexist or you're a bigot or you're a Nazi or you're a homophobe. Right. And that was the norm that they started breaking they called it the Great Awakening. Right. So like right around the time Obama was in office, about 2014, a couple of years after he took office, there was this huge change in the media, another norm breaking, where the media started blasting like every racialized, highly identity like oriented kind of social justice warrior message that they could. Anytime a cop, had a bad police citizen contact with a black person or with, minority, they were boom in the news all the time. They were using the word racist all the time. Like they went from, I think there was a study that said they went from like, this one network went from using the word racist like 11 times in a year to like 20,000 or something like that. Like unbelievable amounts of like racist, sexist, racist, homophobe, racist, transphobe, like in your face all the time. And of course, the people follow that because that's I mean, let's face it, propaganda is effective. That's why people use it, right? And so that was a huge norm change. And then when that norm came in and was broken, then everybody else started making the same accusations, right? That's when critical race theory got real big.
Well, yeah. Well, this was right. The government started right with a Great Awakening, but they gave coverage right to institutions right to create this cancel culture. This is what happened in 2022. We're going to call it peak woke, where if you said right that a trans woman should not be in biological girls' locker room, you would lose your job. You'd be shamed. right?
Yep.
You lose tenured positions at university, you could be debanked. Like, you could not say things. And free speech was really idea of saying thoughts, right? Debating was so clamped down.
Right.
And this was when the reaction to that, this was their height, right? Trans people were at their power. Nobody can criticize them. They were drunk on their own power. Where Elon Musk saw how crazy that awakening was in 2023 and bought Twitter because, or there needed to be, people needed to say free speech because this stifling speech was un-American and it was breaking with the norms, right? And it was, I don't have to engage with you. You just said a microaggression. I can lump you in with a group of bigots. Your ideas don't matter. These group of people, because, are protected from any type of debate or criticism,
Right.
any type, right? And these are the people that held political power at the time.
Right.
And and now they don't hold political power, but I think that bubble has been burst. But that norm was set: free speech for me, but not for thee. And now Trump wants to sort of use that too. He wants to do free speech for them, but not for thee, and wants to do things that maybe aren't as bad yet, but are chilling on free speech.
Definitely.
I don't know if you heard in that podcast that I sent you. Somebody sent a rather innocuous email to a government official that was reviewing an asylum case of somebody to be sent to Afghanistan. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
Not a threat at all, just sort of a plea for sort of mercy and say, hey, really, the Taliban's not a good government. We don't want to, do we really want to send somebody back there?
Right.
And they got a warning that their Gmail had been subpoenaed. They got a 20-minute interview from Department of Homeland Security. Now, they didn't get arrested and nothing after that, but that's still very chilling kind of action for something very innocuous. It's not a threat.
Absolutely.
So again, we believe in free speech, and the left is trying to hold up like Jimmy Kimmel and other people as these free speech martyrs and things like that. When they really clamped down, they were really against free speech when they held power, right? But we have to do it sort of both ways. That's the norm. Is you used to let the KKK march, right? There used to be KKK marches in California. And what would you do? You just wouldn't go to them. But you just ignore them. But now it's like a Republican speaker wants to speak on campus. It's like, well, it might disrupt people too much. And it gets, right? So these norms are sort of letting even ideas you don't agree with have a space. Everybody gets to have their party. And if you don't like it, ignore it, right? But to say like, oh, this will upset people, the opposition will be too much over things, was giving them license to break that norm, and now all of a sudden start restricting conservative speech.
And that's a good point too, especially in colleges where, like, if there's any place where free speech, where the exchange of ideas is supposed to occur, it's on a campus, right? Like, if there's any place, right? That's the universities. That's the whole point, is to bring ideas and cognitive ability from around the world right here to exchange, and Charlie Kirk was a mammoth in that area too. Like, he was the guy, right? He would go everywhere and talk to people, and that was, I mean, it's funny how people on the left have such a negative impression of him, and I'm sitting here thinking like, man, this guy's a hero. This guy, like, all he does is go around, talk to people, and try to, like, understand ideas. That's it. Like, that's all he's ever done. He's never hurt anyone. He doesn't even shout. He doesn't yell. He's a little bit snide at times, right? But and really only when he's matching energy, right? Like when somebody else is coming at him, right? He's usually like, they're telling him how dumb he is. He's like, okay, let's test that, right? But other than that, like, it's amazing to me how. And then I will say this: I stuck up for. I was always against cancel culture, right? And when people tried to, like, cancel Jimmy Kimmel and stuff like that, I was against it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, this, if we need to be consistent. We need to say, look, if we're against something, we're against it. We can't just be against it when it happens to suit our party, right? Or our team or whatever, right? And then it's just another example of where one person breaks the norm and then the rest of the group just like, well, it seems to be effective. We cancel this person, this person, this person, and then we don't have to deal with them anymore. And we've earned the position. I hate it.
Right. the right now, I think what we're faced with, well, and it was during the Biden years, is they started floating the ideas of breaking norms to expand their political power and to seeing if their voters would support it. Right, for a long time, they floated the idea of expanding the number of people on the Supreme Court so they could get a liberal majority. Right, if Biden appointed 5 new justices, there'd be a nice liberal majority. And we went, yeah, and
screwed up.
And people were like, "Whoa!" Really horrified. They found their support for that was really bad. And then later in the year, when North Carolina got hit by the hurricane, and Biden was withholding FEMA funds because of it hit a part of the state that's very Republican. People were really upset by that, and I think that really hurt Kamala Harris's chances too, and found that those actions, those norms, people were, when they floated the ideas or saw those norms breaking, found them more disqualifying. And largely, right, the biggest norm that the Biden administration broke, right, was not enforcing the border at all.
Yeah,
right?
That was huge.
That had been bipartisan. Obama, George Bush, right, they say, hey, look, these are the laws. I'm the president. I got to enforce them. Even if I'd like, more people here, I think it's good for my political power. These are the laws, right? That's what we talk about. Obama deported millions of people. So, but Biden just was like, we're just not going to do that. Right? Kamala Harris is like, I'm not going to go to the border. Or, we're just not going to deport anyone. We'll just give you a court date in 9 years. And and that norm shattered, in its consequences. The whole country was like, no. We've got to go back to the right.
Yeah.
This is enough. And even those that, Trump was not their preferred vehicle, they knew that the country would go back to that. Especially, he campaigned on, I'm going to get the border under control.
Right.
And we believed him, and he's delivered on that, right, to his everlasting credit. But that norm, that bipartisan, you could expect some enforcement, maybe, different levels of it on both sides. Now we have no trust that if a Democrat gets in office, that they'll deport anyone. Right? They've come out that so many of the Democrats are now abolish ICE. What, you want no border enforcement? Look, we on this channel, you've watched us. We're not here to defend how Kristi Noem and Bongino ran the Minnesota operation that led to the shooting deaths. But that does not mean that all of a sudden all of our border laws are invalidated, right?
Yeah, or the operation in general. Well, and the other thing too is like, so you mentioned it earlier, is it's crazy how people will defend their side even if it's against their principles, right? So like, it's like you said, like defending the border, right? The ability of a political entity, whether that be a nation, and a nation's one of the most basic units of political entity, to define who's in it and where it is like the most basic concept of politics, right? Like one of the most basic concepts of a nation, of a group of people who comprise a political system, is we get to figure out who's in that system, and we get to figure out where that system resides. That's it. And that norm has kept not just America around, but the entire world. The nations, the lines that exist on the maps that you see everywhere, it's been around since the dawn of time, right? Like since, tribes were like, look, if you cross this river, we're going to assume that you're coming to take our stuff, right? Like, this is not new, right? Like, lines in the map is not a new thing. And so, but the moment Biden shifts, all of a sudden, all the Democrats are open borders. All of a sudden, right? Even though, like, you ask them literally 2 years prior, and they'd be like, oh, no, yeah, Obama was definitely right to do his deportations, right? Right, all of a sudden, right? And the same thing happens when Trump does something too. It's like, you ask conservative 5 years ago whether or not they were happy with tariffs. Probably the answer is no, right? Probably.
Yeah.
Right. The moment your party like veers off course, What was that study you were talking about? Like where bring up that study because you probably remember more of the details.
Yeah, all right, yeah. So there's a study, and you can link it in the chat or
I'm going to try
thing there where they studied if you're a candidate, if you're a registered Democrat, they would say like, all right, a Democrat breaks one of 8 norms. How likely does that mean? Will that disqualify you and turn you would vote for the other side, right? And they found about 35% of people, if their candidate violated any of these norms, they listed 8 different sort of norms. They would switch sides. Most 45% of people, it was about a coin flip. It would depend maybe on the other candidate or other factors. And about 20% of people were still like, no, I'm still voting bipartisan wise, even with these norms broken. And so, this is the type of thing, like sometimes when people say, like, how can you support Trump, when he's broken this norm? And people are like, how can you support Clinton when he, used his power over an intern and corrupted the office and da. Or how could you support Biden when, he was doing all these things? And people, one of the things is you don't notice the stuff that your guys do because it doesn't anger you as much. The things that we remember that bother us are the things that make us angry.
Yes.
Right? Like nobody on the left remembers when they stopped Miguel Estrada's Supreme Court nomination because they didn't want the Republicans to nominate the first Hispanic member of the Supreme Court. They wanted that to be Sotomayor. They wanted to get that identity card and not have Republicans do it.
I remember.
But they remember Merrick Garland, like they'll tattoo that name across their chest, that he wasn't allowed to have a hearing, And so when offenses or norms are sort of broken against you, we remember it more. And and I think obviously we sort of take it more strongly or personally than maybe even the other side intended. They don't understand how when one side breaks the norm, it's going to be handled by the other opposition. And this is why we're ultimately, and the darkness of this is it's led to violence, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Multiple assassination attempts on Trump, assassination attempts on Steve Scalise.
And guys, this is not a norm that we can come back from.
No.
I'm just saying, like people don't realize because like, dear God in heaven, please don't let us go down this path because this is the kind of thing where like it's one thing to turn from protests into riots, and that's bad enough, right? Like we started breaking that norm right around the George Floyd era, like where we went into Black Lives Matter. And all that. Ferguson, and now we're at the point where we're leaping from just riots and vandalism to targeted removal. Like that's loco, right? That's loco. And there's a brand new trend that's coming in, which is like, I guess is a norm broken too, which it used to be like, I don't know. It seems like, and maybe we never categorized this correctly, but it seemed like the lone gunman was kind of like the American, like, killer, I guess. Like he kind of had this like political radicalization. It was almost always a white male, right? White cis male. Now I'm noticing like trans shooter after trans shooter after trans shooter after trans shooter. There was just another one in British Columbia. And I mean, I just don't want us to get to a point where we're associating that kind of thing with anybody, right? Like it shouldn't be an identity thing, right? It should just be, we should just keep this off the thing altogether. Like nobody should be killing anybody. Nobody should be hurting anybody. If you feel like you're ever at the point where you're ready to be violent, then you've already lost the battle of ideas, right? You're not able to contend with the battle of ideas. So please let's keep it civil. Let's make us, we used to be that nation, right? We used to be the nation that, and it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. This is a bad norm to start breaking, to start, hunting people to start hurting people.
And I would say, right, one of the things and Trump has broken this, but it's been broken on the left too. right, is some of his people that he's put in office have been unqualified.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But he knows they're loyalists to him and they look good on TV or something like that.
Well, I'll tell
And
you
then he's
what.
found that they're sort of incompetent, like Kristi Noem. And then we have the Democrats do that too. Their representatives are people in office that are in over their heads, that aren't up to the job too. And Biden certainly was not, right.
He definitely
To have,
yeah.
right, and they knew he wasn't competent, and that they stood behind that they swore he was fully cognizant and in control and in charge, and not just an Obama shadow presidency, right? Till they blew in the face. And right, Gavin Newsom comes out and says, "Oh yeah, but when the cameras aren't there, he's totally dynamic and in charge and giving orders." And it's like, okay, let's see that. And right, and he's not holding cabinet meetings. And so the sort of, when they say, "Hey, Trump, why can't you appoint more competent people to these positions?" Right? He points to like, you care about competency now, right? You knew Biden was incompetent and you did nothing.
The other norm that was broken too is that, used to be, I mean, ultimately the buck stops with the president, right? Like that used to be the level of respect that office got, right? And so this is kind of an offshoot of one norm that basically got broken because of a norm getting broken, right? And so when President Trump was in office the first time, it's like you said, he met resistance that no other president basically in history, except for maybe Lincoln, ever faced. Like no other president in history had like general after general, advisor after advisor, like literally like stabbing him in the back, right? And so of course, then Trump responds to that with another, I think a bad norm break, but it was still something that he's just trying to come up with something to do, because if literally the entire well is poisoned against you the moment you walk into office, you have to get a new well. Now it sucks that the new well doesn't produce water like the last one, but I mean it's just like, what else is he going to do, right? Like he's got to find a bunch of people that are actually on board. And I hate to say it, I've been a manager, and I know what leadership is like, right? And I've never managed at Trump's level, but I can tell you that I've been in situations where I walked into a new store. And by the way, anytime you take over a new thing as a manager, anytime you walk into a new position as leader, there's a bunch of things that have to happen. You have to earn respect, right? Because you're dealing with people that you didn't hire, right? They don't know who you are. They don't know what your standards are. They don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? So you walk in, and almost always you walk into a situation where an opportunity was created specifically because somebody before you wasn't doing their job right. Almost always. And this was no different from when Trump walked in after Democrat control for each time, right? And so he walks in and he's got all these people against him. That is what you do as a leader. You get rid of them. You restaff the entire place. That's what you're supposed to do. And it does mean that you restaff with people that aren't as qualified and you train them. That's what leaders do. Now, maybe Trump doesn't have, it's a little bit different for the president, because whereas I was a manager of a convenience store and I knew literally every aspect of the convenience store to train, Trump doesn't know every aspect of running the world, right? So he can't just like teach Rubio how to be Rubio and Hegseth how to be Hegseth and Kristi Noem how to be Kristi Noem. He can't do that, right? So it's a little bit different in his situation, but the general principles still apply. You have to get rid of the existing staff, replace it with somebody new, and coach them up. That's still the general concept. Now, I want to talk about, let's see. So yeah, Tanya, great question. So she's asking like what I literally said about trans was right, is that we don't want to make anything of individual identities. Now, this is key. It is different to talk about identity by ideology, right? And there's a reason for that, right? And you'd probably understand if I brought this up with more extreme ideologies, right? Like it's easy for someone to say, we shouldn't talk about left versus right. What about capitalism versus Nazism? right? All of a sudden, then we all know that the right thing to do is to say that Nazism probably doesn't have a place in our world, right? All of a sudden, right? Identity by ideology is attackable. It is on the docket. Now, that doesn't mean that we should segregate ourselves as humans. This is another big norm that I think we broke coming up. Like because I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, we could have arguments, we could have political discussions. And at the end of the day, it was like, all right, what are you doing after this? You want to go get something to eat? Cool. And that was it. That was the end of the discussion. That was the end of any damage to like the relationship. You would just go have a beer with the guy and everything was cool. Now you see people saying like if you voted for Trump, swipe left, like if you did this person or you voted for this person or you belong to this team, you can no longer be part of our family during Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that type of social segregation, and we did a whole show on this. That there are things, and that was the norm, right? That there was politics was things, but certain things weren't politics. The World Series, the Super Bowl football. There were certain things that were refuges from politics that we could just go and relax, and that making everything political is just exhausting. And it's a playbook it's a Marxist playbook is to make everything politics.
Yeah.
But it should, and they've called trying to say, well, that's not political, that's a white supremacy, or that's flouting our privilege that we can allow things to be non-political. But it is a norm. It is a norm that has a long history in America, and that for us to have civic dialogue, because it's government by the people, where we've got to get along and see the humanity of our neighbors, even if they disagree about the proper role of the government.
Yeah.
Right.
Now I'll give you this.
Oh, sorry.
One thing that is important to note, and then this is it's good that Tanya brought this up, is that I don't know that the words like left versus right are really very precise anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like one thing I say often to my friends is that I'm a conservative, not a Republican, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not. First of all, I'm not registered Republican. I'm actually registered Libertarian, but that's beside the point. Even when I was kind of registered Republican, I didn't feel very Republican anymore, like because Trump's transitioned the Republican Party a lot. That isn't to say that it's good or bad. It's just that it's not what I am, right? My principles, my ideology is no longer that. So it's kind of complicated to just say this person is right leaning. I don't even know what that means anymore, right? So it's complicated to it's complicated to bracket things like this. Like if you were to go 30 years ago, I could tell you that this is what left means and this is what right means. And it was almost always Democrats were left, Republicans were right, Democrats were liberal, Republicans were conservative, and that was it. And you could very clearly pick out their platform, right? Like it was
spend more, spend less, tax more, tax less, big government, small government. Yeah.
Exactly. Now I'm not so sure you can do that. Like now you can say like, are you right leaning? I'm like, you're going to have to tell me exactly what you mean by that because
socially right leaning, because I think that's been still the big differentiator on the left is the social leftism about the breakdown of the family, the patriarchal order, and the rising political power of LGBT, but also the TQ, the Marxist TQ party.
IA plus 2X. And you know what? Like even along the left, there's lots of like brackets and variations. Now there's like liberals and there's leftists and then there's progressives. And I don't even know that I could tell you the difference between all the three, right? Like, I don't know. I could just tell you, but I can tell you there are some things that are similar amongst all of them, right? And if I ever use the words like loosely like that, imprecisely like that, I'm usually referring to a commonality, right? So like if I say, the left does this a lot, like it is still true that, for example, the left breaks norms faster than the right, right? And that's, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it is the right thing to do to leap over the fence. Sometimes, right? Sometimes it's the only thing to do, right? And it's dangerous to not be able to do that, right? To never to be able to update yourself.
rolling back, enacting Roe versus Wade was breaking the norm, and rolling it back was breaking the norm. It was in force for so long. It was traumatic to go back. So both things, I certainly think that the pushing it back was the right thing to do, and the country, I think, has largely accepted that too.
Yeah.
That the states will let that should be an issue for the states. And the Democrats have come around, when Trump is the president at least, with the idea of federalism, of letting the states have as much power as they can, and that the federal government should not dictate policy and things like that. So we can see. We would love if that would continue,
right?
To,
You know what?
when they hold the presidency, right?
That's just another one of those things where, like, if you'd asked a liberal like 3 years ago, if you're like national rights or states' rights, it would be national rights like across the board, right? Like 100%, right? You're like, should we nationalize this? Should we If you'd asked them 5 years ago, should we federalize elections? Holy cow, it would have been like 98% federalize elections, right? Now it's like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things where, saying the words left versus right can get confusing, because I'm not sure that I know all what it means.
This is the TDS, is that they swap positions just wherever Trump comes down. And it used to be, right, that I would define it, if they thought that there was a problem and the only solution was for the government to address it and solve it, then that was the left. Right?
Yeah.
The government is the answer. And the right was like, well, maybe something short of the government, maybe the government, allows a framework where somebody can step in and do that. That was the more conservative or the right side of it. Now, I do want to say, I think this year, the midterm elections are going to be about be about a referendum on Trump, even though he's not on the ballot, and about the norms he's breaking, not just enforcement norms, right? Because he ran on that. But what we're talking about, he's reevaluating, this is foreign policy, he's reevaluating our role in NATO, right? And our national security strategy is very different. His engagement with China is very different than what has gone on before. He's broken some norms that have and is reevaluating those.
Interesting.
Right? And he feels like he can engage with China through strength, with areas where we're strong, but he's also reevaluating our longtime allies. Now there are a lot of people who are crying, how dare we? Because NATO was very sacred for our whole life, right? That was our NATO membership and things like that. Because I grew up with that Cold War where the USSR was the big bugaboo. And the Warsaw Pact, and we needed to be united to stand against that. Well, it's been 36 years since the USSR crumbled, and Trump is just saying, hey, maybe we should reevaluate stuff, and maybe we should be more concerned with our sphere of influence over here in the Western Hemisphere. It's kind of a common sense, right? And to bring back to Monroe, they call it the Donroe Doctrine. That's a breaking a big norm, and a lot of people are like, oh, the world will hate us, our visas, it'll make us harder to travel around the world, and people will not love us like they did after World War II. All right, so that's a very real concern to some people. You roll your eyes, and a lot of Main Street normal non-elites roll their eyes at that, but that's going to be a referendum on that norm breaking too. Our interaction with the world is going to be whether people agree with that or not.
Yeah, it'll also be a referendum on, so a lot of what happens in these votes, right, in these elections, is not about the way things are, but just about the way people feel about the way things are, right? So a very common one that we're going to run into, and Tanya sort of brushed on it with her recent question, is people still feel like the economy is difficult, right? That's what they feel. And
Dow hit 50,000 today, right? You saw that.
What's that?
The Dow hit 50,000 today.
Oh yeah. The market, of course, is way up, but of course, to be fair, that usually only affects those that can invest. But that's still like a good 50-60% of the population. Now, the interesting thing is, one of the problems that's happening with affordability, the word that's getting thrown out a lot now especially by left-wing media, because it feels bad for Trump. In reality, it isn't actually bad. The economy is actually doing great. It's actually like objectively doing very, very well. The new jobs report like blew things out of the water, like way more jobs created than they thought. The unemployment is way down. The inflation is almost exactly at target. It's like 2.1%, where the target's 2. Like everything is like running on all cylinders. But what happens is there's another concept called price memory. What people see is they remember 5 years ago, right before Biden's inflation like swamped everything. They remembered eggs being a dozen for $1, right? That's what they remembered. They remember, like, you can get 18 eggs for like $1.88 or something like that. That's what they remember. And so now they look at the price on the shelf and they're like, gosh, everything is so expensive. The truth is, the prices aren't supposed to come down. They're never supposed to come down. They're supposed to just stay there while wages go up and soar over. And literally every single month since Trump has been in office, there's been a positive CPI gain. Every single month. So literally every single month, wage growth has exceeded the inflation. Every single month, which means the market is recovering from the inflation that happened under Biden. And it wasn't even Biden's fault. Most of it. Some of it was, but most of it was just supply chain disruption.
The biggest thing, and this is what Trump did today, was through executive action, through regulatory and the EPA, was Biden had put this big stranglehold on American business to comply with global climate change green ideology, and Trump finally broke that down and released these regulatory. That's why the markets responded very favorably to that.
Yep.
It's really going to be a while before those effects are felt, but it's sort of taking the handcuffs off American industry.
Yep.
And then we'll see, the results of that. Hopefully, people will feel that before the election. It's certainly going to be at least a quarter, but I feel like that's a positive thing that maybe people that didn't notice. But like CO2, they don't have to worry about treating CO2 like a pollutant when they had to, right, under Biden, and that EPA regulation finally dead this week.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same thing happens for every president, by the way. Like literally every president runs into the situation where the people feel one way. The reality is something different, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is what people feel, which is why, by the way, even though Biden's economy was recovering by the end of his term, right? It like just because it was just part of the natural ebb and flow of economy. And there was no matter what Biden was, because Biden was dead the whole time anyway, no matter what Biden was going to do, it was going to recover. Even though it was starting to recover, people still felt like it was terrible because they remember last year it was terrible, and it still, just feels terrible. So
they didn't trust Kamala Harris, right? Anyway, she wasn't a serious person.
I certainly did. Yeah, but anyway, so that's the game. So like, we watch the polls. Obviously, the polls are pretty negative for Trump right now, and again, it's because of how people feel, not because of what things actually are. Now, I have a whole slew of problems with Trump that are independent of economy, but that's the game. But today, that's all we really wanted to talk about was norm breaking. Yeah,
I got one thing, and spicy. It's a question for you. This is a spicy thing for you and for our followers, watchers out there. Where do you come down on the Senate filibuster? Right, they've been talking about that and floating it because they want to see what the public support is out there. Right, if they break that norm, are people going to be like, oh my gosh, and switch sides, like be like, no, the country needs to go back left if they break the filibuster, or if they're going to see, no, there's a lot of support out there, or people don't really care, or people don't understand it, low information voters. So what's your take on, do you think that norm should be broken? Do you think they're going to break it? They're definitely testing the waters.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, actually. I haven't thought about it enough. I thought originally when I heard about it, I was like, why is it even here? But then, like, since then, of course, I've come to appreciate what it means. But I don't know. I think that God, it's tough, right? Like if they take it away, then both sides have free reign, and Trump is going to run into Democrat run House in a minute. So I don't know. It's complicated.
I know. As a conservative, I would like to. I think we generally come down to we should only break norms with great care.
Right.
We should try to think back that maybe this was a hard fought rule and something we've learned about. And so I would encourage them not to break that norm and not to do this the filibuster. But certainly, if Trump it's a panic move if he feels like he can't get more legislative stuff done before the midterms. We might see that broken. And yes, I don't think the Democrats will want to reinstitute it or have any respect for it if we break it down.
Yeah, right. Hey, so yeah, first, last, just through the gauntlet a little bit. Just a reiteration, guys. You guys are always welcome to come on the show and discuss politics with me, debate. Happy to discuss it with anyone. Matter of fact, I actually kind of prefer talking with people on the other side of the aisle or whatever, because it's more interesting that way. Like I don't want to be in an echo chamber. Yeah. Ryan, definitely reach out. Put a comment in the thing, and we'll talk. I'll get you my email. We'll talk definitely. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you. Try not to break any norms on your way home. And no, I'm kidding. But we do appreciate your viewership. If you guys want to support us in another way, we got Patreon. Come check us out. Get a membership. We're going to be doing some things and moving some gears with that. And we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.
Hey, keep it coming.
Keep it coming.